Yu was finally back home. As she touched her chest, a shiny new necklace caught her eye. It wasn't there yesterday, but now it sparkled around her neck. The necklace had tiny silver links and a special pendant with a big see-through stone in the middle. The stone was shaped like a teardrop, and when Yui ran her finger over it, she felt a tiny bit of warmth. But before Yui got home, something crazy happened. She disappeared into a bunch of twinkling lights, and her friend Asuna was left crying on the cold floor. Kirito, who was with them, suddenly yelled out in anger. "Cardinal," he shouted at the top of his lungs. Asuna looked up, tears streaming down her face, and saw Kirito screaming at the ceiling. He was furious. "You can't just get away with everything." He gritted his teeth and jumped onto a big black console in the middle of the room. Then, he started typing away on a special keyboard that floated in the air, above the stone floor. Asuna's sadness vanished for a second. She was totally shocked. "Hey Kirito, what's going on?" she stuttered. Kirito's eyes were fixed on the screen, his fingers flying everywhere. "I think I can still hack into the system, using my special admin account," he muttered. Suddenly a huge window opened up, and the room was filled with a bright glow. Lines of code started scrolling by super fast. Asuna watched quietly as Kirito tried different commands, hoping one would work. Suddenly a progress bar popped up and started filling in from left to right. But just before it was complete, boom! The whole stone console lit up with a chilly white glow and Kirito went flying backward. A huge explosion rocked the air, making everything shake. Kirito!" someone screamed, rushing to his side to help him up. Kirito sat up, rubbing his head. But despite looking super tired, he couldn't help but crack a small smile. He held out his closed fist to Asuna. A secret inside. She looked puzzled, but still reached out with her open hand. Then he opened his fist, and a beautiful crystal dropped into her palm. The crystal was shaped like a teardrop and sparkled with a steady white light at its center. "What is this?" Asuna wondered. He explained. "Just before we lost access to the special controls that Yugi used, I managed to save her program files, and turn them into something real, this amazing crystal." Asuna's eyes shone with hope as she whispered, "Yui's heart is in here." But Kirito was exhausted. He collapsed onto the floor and closed his eyes, like all his energy had been sucked out. Asuna carefully looked at the special jewel in her hand. "I know you're in there, little Yui," she said, her voice trembling. Tears started flowing again. Just then the soft light inside the crystal pulsed brighter than before, like it was answering Asuna's call. After saying a sad goodbye to their friend Sasha, Uriel Thinker and the kids, Asuna and Kirito, stepped through a magical gate that took them to the 22nd floor. Whoosh! A cool breeze hit them, carrying the fresh scent of the forest. It was like a whole new world awaited them. Asuna took a big breath and gazed out at the amazing world around her. It was hard to believe they'd only been traveling for 3 days. It felt like so much longer. This incredible place was full of wonder and mystery. Asuna thought about all the weird and wonderful things she'd seen so far. There were tons of floors, each one filled with people living their own lives, laughing, crying, and having all sorts of adventures. It was mind-blowing to think about how many stories were unfolding on each floor, and Asuna couldn't wait to explore more of this crazy floating world. Let's get real, most of these people were probably miserable, not having the time of their lives. But despite that, they kept pushing through their own struggles. Asuna gazed up at the floor above them as they made their way home. Suddenly a thought hit her. She had to go back to the front line. Where did she fit in, anyway? She wondered about her place, but for now one thing was certain. She had a duty to return to battle. "Get ready for a showdown. I'll be picking up my sword again soon, and diving back into battle. I'm not sure how long it'll take, but I won't stop fighting until every player in this game is smiling again." That's what Yui wanted, to make people happy. Just then someone called out to me. "Hey, Kirito." I turned around. "What's up?" My friend asked a question that made me think. If we win the game and this world disappears, what happens to Yui? I hadn't thought of that before. To be honest, I said, I'm running low on memory space. I don't know what will happen to her. "Hey, I've got my nerve gear set up to remember some important stuff from our adventures," Kirito explained. "It's like a special memory box that stores info about our surroundings. If I'm lucky, I might be able to pull out US data and make her show up in the real world." Asuna's face lit up with excitement. She leaned over and gave Kirito a big squeeze. That means we'll get to see you race again. Outside of the game, she said, her voice full of hope. Let's start with a brand new beginning. Asuna gazed at a sparkly crystal in front of her. It was a special moment. She was thinking about their first child. We'll be great parents, someone said, trying to sound confident. Asuna smiled, hoping it would all work out. Later that day, on the 46th floor of Aincrad, something totally different was happening. It was December 2023, and the atmosphere was intense. Suddenly a powerful strike lit up the dark space. The Vorpal strike was like a blood-red flash that destroyed two giant bugs in an instant. Their digital bodies burst into pieces, and I caught a glimpse of it out of the corner of my eye. As soon as I could move again, I spun around to block the jaws of another bug that was attacking me from behind. It was a close call. The rush of battle was exhilarating but also super scary. Would I make it out alive? I just took down a giant ant in an epic way. It let out a super loud ear-piercing screech as it flipped backward, but I wasn't having it. With one swift move it was gone. This cool attack is something I just learned 3 days ago. When my one-handed sword skill got really strong, it reached 9. I'm loving how useful it is. The only downside is that I have to wait a bit after using it, but it's worth it. This move can hit enemies from way farther away than my sword can normally reach, twice as far. Actually. And the best part, it packs a punch as powerful as a big two-handed lance. Imagine using the same move over and over against another player. They'd figure out your timing in no time. But against the game's monster AI, it was a different story. I could use it repeatedly and slice through the enemy hordes with ease, leaving a trail of red behind me. However, after nearly an hour of fighting wave after wave of monsters, in the dim torchlight I started to feel my focus slipping away. It was getting tough to stay concentrated. I was in trouble. The giant ants were coming at me with a simple but super annoying attack, biting and spitting acid. My reflexes were getting tired from dodging their attacks. There were tons of these huge ants, and they weren't easy to beat. They lived just 3 floors below where I was now, on the 49th floor, which made them really strong. I was still safe for now, but if I got surrounded and didn't defend myself, my health would start to drop fast. So why was I putting myself through this? The answer was simple. This floor was a great place to level up quickly and get lots of experience points. Even though I'd already explored it before, it was like a training ground. But going solo made it way more challenging. Imagine being surrounded by giant ants pouring out of holes in the cliffs. These fierce creatures pack a strong punch, but they're not very tough themselves. If you can dodge their attacks, you can take down a bunch of them quickly. It's like a big game of dodge and strike. However, this isn't a great place to hunt alone. If you get surrounded by too many ants, it's easy to get overwhelmed and lose control. That's when things can get really ugly, and you might just become the ants' next victim. But here's the thing, this spot is super popular and everyone knows the rules. When you're waiting to hunt, you have to take turns every hour. It's like a gentleman's agreement. The problem was, I was all alone, no team to trade off with. Meanwhile, back at the canyon entrance, my friends from our guild were probably getting annoyed, wondering when I'd finally show up. They were likely pacing back and forth, looking pretty frustrated. To be honest, getting frustrated was probably the best thing that could happen to me. Most players in the big guilds thought working together was a no-brainer, and they loved to call me names like power-crazed lunatic or lone wolf. But I didn't let it bug me. I glanced at the timer on my screen and saw that 57 minutes had passed. I made a mental note to retreat and regroup next time there was a lull in the ant attacks. I took a deep breath and focused all my energy on the last big push. Suddenly, ants were closing in on me from both sides. I quickly threw a pick at the ant on my right, hitting it straight on and freezing it in its tracks. Then, I turned to the ant on my left, and used a cool move called Sharp Nail. It's a 3-part attack that always gets the job done. But I wasn't done yet. I spun around and struck the first ant with a powerful Vorpal strike, right into its open jaws. It was a sweet victory. As I waited for my powers to recharge, something gross came flying at me. A big green glob of acid. I blocked it with my glove, but it still hurt a little bit. My health points or HP went down, and my glove started to smoke and hiss. That was super annoying. I jumped really high into the air, and managed to squish the ant that had thrown the acid at me. When I landed, I took out the last 2 ants with a cool combo of 6 attacks in a row. It was my best move yet. Total bug bashing blast. I took off like a shot, not wanting any more ants to pour out of their nest. I sprinted through the 30-meter-long ant canyon in just a few seconds. It wasn't until I burst out of the narrow entrance that I finally caught my breath. As I gulped in fresh air, I wondered, was I just imagining things, or was my real body back in the real world struggling to breathe too? Ugh. My stomach suddenly did a crazy flip, and I threw up all over the place. I fell to the freezing ground feeling super weak. As I lay there, I heard people coming towards me. I knew who they were, but I wasn't exactly in the mood for chatting. I waved my hand weakly, trying to shoo them away. Just then, a gruff voice spoke up, sounding like a old gate scraping against concrete. "You guys can go ahead without me," the voice said with a deep sigh. "I've gotten a bit of a lead, so I'll just sit this one out today. Stay tight, team. Keep the circle formation strong and watch each other's backs. If you're in trouble, just shout out, 'We've got your back.' And if the queen shows up, get out of there fast." The group chimed in with a loud yes. And then they were off, their footsteps stomping through the grass as they moved out. I was finally able to catch my breath. I used one hand to push myself up and leaned against a nearby tree branch for support. Just what I needed. My friend tossed me a special potion that would help me feel better. "Thanks," I said, catching it and quickly removing the cork with my thumb. Then, I drank the whole thing, in one gulp. The taste was sour and lemony. But to me, it was the best drink ever. I tossed the empty bottle aside, and it was weird. Just a few seconds later, it started to glow softly, and then vanished into thin air. I'd known Klein for what felt like forever. He's the leader of our guild, Furinkazan, and we met way back when we first started playing SAO. Some things never change. He still wore that silly bandana on his head, and had a scruffy face that he liked to call a beard. Klein looked at me with a concerned expression. "Hey Kirito, don't you think you're taking a big risk?" he asked. "How long have you been stuck here?" I let out a tired sigh and replied, "Since around 8 o'clock last night." Klein made a crazy face. "Dude, it's 2 a.m. You've been doing this for 6 hours straight. If you get tired here, you're done for. It's not safe." The other person just shrugged. "I'm good. When others show up and start waiting in line, I take a break for an hour or two." Klein raised an eyebrow. "Yeah, but if nobody showed up, you'd just keep going all night, wouldn't you?" The person nodded. "That's why I come here when it's super late, to avoid the crowds." You might be stuck waiting for 5 or 6 hours," Klein said, scrunching up his face in distaste. He pulled out an super rare katana from his belt, and plopped down in front of me. "Listen, I've known you're a powerhouse since the very first day of Sword Art Online," he said with a grin. "So what's your level now?" Normally, players kept their levels and stats secret. It was like a unwritten rule in the game. But with Klein, I didn't need to be so secretive. He was a friend, after all. I shrugged and told the truth. "I just leveled up today. I'm at 69 now." Klein's eyes went wide with surprise. He stopped rubbing his chin and stared at me. "No way. How did you get so far ahead of me? You're a whole 10 levels higher than me now." He shook his head, looking confused. "This is crazy. Your progress is insane. Come on, be honest. You're just like me, right? You spend your free time searching for secret spots to hunt and collect stuff. I don't get why you're so obsessed with this. Don't try to tell me it's because you want to finish the game faster. That's not a good enough reason. What really matters is how our whole group works together, especially when we're taking on tough bosses. The big groups like the Knights of Battle Cove are the ones who set the pace for all of us. So give me a break." "I'm hooked on leveling up," I admitted with a laugh. "Getting experience points just feels awesome." But Klein wasn't having it. He gave me a stern look and said, "Don't try to joke your way out of this. I know how tough it is to grind for levels all by yourself. It's exhausting, and hunting in a place like this without a partner. That's just crazy. Especially when you're not even close to level 70 yet. You're basically asking to get wiped out. Imagine walking on a super thin tightrope. It's crazy." That's what I thought when I looked at this situation. What's in it for you? I wondered. Klein was part of a group called Furinkazan. They were a team of friends he knew from way back, even before the game Sword Art Online started. These guys were like a bunch of free spirits who didn't like to be told what to do. Klein, their leader, was no different. He was a cool guy, but I had a feeling he was looking out for me, because he felt like he had to. Maybe he didn't want to see a solo player like me get into trouble. I had a hunch about what was going on, so I decided to cut him some slack. Hey, you don't have to pretend to be worried just for my benefit, I said with a smile. Let's be real, you're wondering if I'm after those flag mobs, right? You see, flag mobs are like special monsters in the game that have a secret code inside them. This code can trigger a new quest or make something cool happen in the game. These creatures would pop up every now and then, maybe once every few hours or days. But some of them were like super powerful bosses. You could only summon them once, and then they'd be gone for good. As you can guess, these boss monsters were ridiculously strong. It made sense that you'd need a whole team to take them down. Klein's face turned red with guilt, and he looked away, rubbing his chin. I didn't mean anything by it. Then someone jumped in, saying, "Let's be real." Klein's eyes went wide with shock. You're telling me that you bought a secret from Argo about me getting info on a Christmas event, boss? He asked, his voice full of surprise. Then he clicked his tongue in annoyance. Argo is something else. No wonder they call her the Rats. She'll sell anything for the right price. He shook his head, chuckling. I mean, she'd even sell her own secrets if someone offered her enough. We're on the same page now. We both want to beat that tough Christmas boss. We've also picked up all the clues from the non-player characters' NPCs so far. That means you should get why I'm putting in so much time and effort, even if it seems crazy. And don't worry, I know why you tried to warn me off. But I'm not listening. The guy looked sheepish and said, sorry, my bad. I shouldn't have tried to trick you. He dropped his hand from his chin and rubbed the back of his head, feeling embarrassed. Only 5 days to go until the big night on the 24th. Every guild is scrambling to get ready for the epic boss battle. But let's be real, who wants to be out in the freezing cold in the middle of the night? Not many people are that crazy. So, here's the deal. Our team is coming along great. We've got almost 10 members on board. We've got a battle ahead of us, and for once we think we can actually win. But let's be real. Taking on a huge crowd of flag-waving players all by ourselves. No way. I gazed down at the dry brown grass beneath my feet. It was hard to argue with that logic. A whole year had gone by inside the virtual world of Aincrad. Now, with our second Christmas in the game just around the corner, rumors were spreading like wildfire among the players. What would happen this time around? The excitement was building. It all started about a month ago. Characters in the game called NPCs began sharing clues on different floors. They were talking about a super cool quest. According to them, something big was going to happen on December 24th. At exactly midnight, during the month of Holly, that's when a monster named Nicholas the Renegade would show up in a forest somewhere in the game. And get this, he'd appear right at the base of a gigantic fir tree. Imagine beating this incredible creature and getting your hands on the huge treasure bag strapped to its back. The reward was so epic that even the most powerful guilds, who usually only cared about conquering new labyrinths, couldn't help but drool at the thought. Whether the treasure was a pile of gold coins or a bunch of super rare weapons, it would be a huge boost to their main mission. The possibility of getting rich and powerful was too exciting to ignore. Imagine getting a gift from a game that had only taken from us so far. That's what happened in Sword Art Online. They gave us a special Christmas present, and it was too cool to ignore. At first I wasn't interested in the rumors about it though. As a solo player, I didn't think I could handle it on my own. My friend Klein agreed. This was probably a tough monster that I couldn't beat by myself. But I had done okay for myself in the game so far. I had earned enough money to even buy my own virtual house if I wanted to. To be honest, I never wanted to be famous for taking part in this crazy flag hunt. But everything changed about 2 weeks ago when I found some cool info from a non-player character NPC. It completely flipped my thinking around. Since then, I've been going to all the popular hunting spots trying to level up as much as possible. I didn't care if people laughed at me. I just wanted to get ahead. My friend Klein joined me for a bit, and we hung out in silence. But after a while he started talking again in his deep voice. It's something else that's bothering you, isn't it? He asked. Hey, you've heard the rumors about that crazy resurrection thing, right? I asked. He nodded. So I figured it was time to come clean. Yeah, it's true, I said. The guy with the cool katana let out a deep sigh again. I could tell he was thinking, this is just too good to be true. And honestly, I felt the same way. The story went like this: some special tool in a sack could actually bring back people who had died. It sounded amazing but also kind of fake. I mean, who wouldn't want something like that to exist? but at the same time it seemed too awesome to be real. Even the guy with the katana was skeptical. "I don't know, man," he said. "That part about bringing back the dead, it's probably just a myth." Let's get real, things have changed since the game Sal first came out. Back then, it was supposed to be a fair virtual reality game where you could play without worrying about super harsh penalties. I think there was an item that would bring a dead player back to life without making them lose any progress. But those days are gone. Now, if your character dies, that's it, game over for real. Hey, do you remember what that crazy guy Kaba said on our first day in the game? I'll never forget his words. He was like a ghost, hidden in the shadows, but his voice sent chills down my spine. He warned us that if our health points dropped to 0, we'd be kicked out of the game for good. And get this, he said we'd never be able to come back to our real bodies. I didn't think he was joking around. His words still haunt me. I spoke up, trying to sound braver than I felt. "Honestly, none of us really knows what happens when you die in this game." Klein scrunched up his face and let out a sarcastic laugh. "You think it's that easy? That if you die, you'll just wake up back in your real body, good as new, and then Kadokawa will jump out and say gotcha? Come on. You can't be serious. We figured this out last year. If it was all just a big prank, don't you think the people who already died would have told everyone? And wouldn't we have all gotten rid of our nerve-dull gears by now?" But that's not what happened. The fact that people are still taking this seriously shows that there are real risks involved, and death is one of them. When our health points drop to 0, the nerve gear headset basically turns into a deadly trap. It's like it microwaves our brains from the inside out. If that's not what happens, then what about all the people who got defeated by those terrifying monsters? The ones who screamed in fear, begging to escape. I suddenly interrupted him, my voice coming out rougher than I expected. "Shut up," I said firmly. "If you think I don't already know all this, then we've got nothing left to discuss." Remember what Heathcliff from Knights of the Blood said when we teamed up to beat that tough floor boss? He told us that if there's even a tiny chance, just 1%, that you can save your friends, you should go for it with everything you've got. If someone isn't willing to try that hard to help their teammates, then they're not worth having in your party. Let's think about this for a second. Even if I don't really like the guy who said it, he might be onto something. Imagine you die in the game, but your mind doesn't just disappear. Instead, it gets stuck in some kind of limbo. You're just hanging out, waiting to see what happens next in the game. It's like being on hold forever, not knowing if you'll get to come back, or what will happen to you. That's a pretty weird and scary thought. I shared my crazy idea, and for a moment everyone stared at me. It wasn't often that I spoke up like that. But when I did, something unexpected happened. Klein's anger started to fade, and he looked at me with a mix of surprise and pity. After a pause, he spoke in a calm, quiet voice. "I get it," he said. "You're still stuck on your old guild, aren't you, Kirito?" He shook his head. "It's been over 6 months since everything happened." I looked away, feeling a bit embarrassed. "Hey, that's not that long," I muttered. I'll never forget what happened. Our whole group, the Moonlit Black Cats, was destroyed, and I'm the only one left. We weren't a team that usually fought on the front lines, but we decided to take a risk and venture close to the edge of our territory. Then, disaster struck. Our thief accidentally triggered a trap, which set off an alarm. It wasn't their fault though. If anyone talks about it, they'll be saying how brave our thief was for trying, not criticizing them. But that's not what's bothering me.